Hello everybody, this is Harshit from Edureka, and in this tutorial I'll be talking about Python database connection along with its practical implementation. So let's see what are the offerings of today's session. Well, I'm going to start off today's session by giving you a small introduction about Python and MySQL, further which I'm going to talk a bit about integrated connection. Then I'm going to talk about the internal working logic behind when you actually establish a connection between Python and MySQL DB. And last but not the least, I'm going to end my tutorial by performing CRUD operations with Python and MySQL. So I hope you guys are clear with the agenda. So without wasting further time, let me just dive into my tutorial and talk about my first topic, that is Introduction to Python and MySQL. Well, as you already know, Python is one of the most widely used programming language and in demand among developers. But you can't merely develop any application without having to know where to store the data. So this is where database management system comes into picture, and one of the most widely used DBMS server that is also used in the industry practices is MySQL DB server. Let me move ahead and talk a bit about integrated connection. Alright guys, this is just a glimpse of how the bigger picture will look like. What I'm trying to do is I'm basically trying to integrate my Python with my backend database server and then do the further manipulations. Now let me move ahead and explain you the internal working logic behind when you establish a connection between Python and MySQL DB server, or I can say that I'm basically going to explain you the internal working logic, that how does it actually connect or work. So as you can see, there are numerous pictures given in this slide. On my extreme right hand side, there's a picture of a database, and on my extreme left hand side, there's a picture of a Python application, and in between lies the MySQL connector Python API. So MySQL connector Python API is nothing but acts as a bridge between my front-end Python application and my back-end database server. Now when I say this word Python application, think of any Python application. Let's say think of a website which a user has developed, which lies in the front end. Now my front-end Python application will basically send a connection request to the MySQL connector Python API. Then the API will forward the same request to the database, further which the database will accept the request and send the connected message, and then my Python application will send a cursor connection request. So over here, think of connection as a method and cursor as an object, which basically lets you communicate through your entire MySQL DB server and also lets you create your own database. Finally, my Python application will execute a certain SQL statement or a certain SQL query, and for that my backend database server will fetch the result data. So guys, this was it with the internal working logic that basically works behind when the Python and MySQL DB server connection is taking place. Now let me move ahead and talk a bit about operations which I'm going to perform with Python and MySQL. So guys, I'm basically going to perform CRUD operations, which simply means create, read, update and delete with my Python and MySQL. So let me move ahead and show you the implementation of CRUD operations from coding point of view. So let me quickly open my PyCharm. Alright. Guys, before diving deep into the coding perspective, my first and foremost step is to basically import the MySQL connector package. And how do I do that? I'll click on File, click on Settings, click on Project Interpreter. On the extreme right hand side, there's a picture of a plus sign, and then type here MySQL connector. Alright, click on MySQL connector, click on Install Package. It will basically take a minute or two to get installed. Essentially, our first step is to install the MySQL connector package, which forms the stepping stone for our further operations, which I'm going to do. Again, it'll take a minute or two to get installed. Alright, so as you can see, our package MySQL connector has been installed successfully. Now, one of the other approach to install the same thing is, suppose this is for those set of users who don't use any Python IDE. Suppose you're using a Python command line. So for them, quickly open command prompt. Once your command prompt is opened, quickly go there and type pip install MySQL connector, which is the package, and press enter. Well, it is going to show me or give me a message that is requirement already satisfied, since I've already imported the package on my PyCharm IDE. But this demonstration I'm showing for those set of users who simply use Python command line. So for them, you can go to your command prompt, type pip install MySQL-connector. Your MySQL-connector package will be installed, and then you can import your same package on your Python command line, and then you can move on with the further operations. So now it's saying me a warning. This is none of our concern, guys. Let me just quickly close it. And as I've already created a file under the name of Python DB creation, I'll move on with my coding demonstration. So let me enter the presentation mode and start off by writing my first line of code. So the first line of code which I'm going to write over here is I'm simply going to import the package which I installed just now, that is MySQL-connector. I'm sorry, it will be MySQL.connector. Now I'm going to create a local DB instance, that is MyDB, under which I'm going to write MySQL.connector.connect, under which I'm going to pass in the three parameters that are host, which is equal to your local host, then comes the username, that is equals to root, and then comes the password, which is equals to password 123. So root is the default username which I had given, guys, and password 123 can also be customized. So this is the password which I gave. Now I'll merely print this local DB instance, that is MyDB. Quickly go ahead and run this code. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so as you can see, the connection has taken place, but how do I verify whether the connection has been established successfully or not? So in order to do that, I'm just going to write two more lines of code, that is if mydb, then print, that is if it falls or if there's a local DB instance, that is mydb, then I'm going to print connection successful, else I'm simply going to terminate this, or I'm going to write print connection, that is if there's a local DB instance, that is MyDB is coming, or under MyDB it is coming, or the parameters are there, then my connection will be successful, else my connection will be unsuccessful. Let me move ahead and run this code. Give me a minute, guys. Well, as you can see, our connection is successful. Now I'll just change one parameter and see whether it's verifying that the connection will be established successfully or not. Now I'm going to change a parameter. Suppose I'm changing the root, which is the default name of user, to Ram, and let's see if the connection is being established successfully or not, or it is being verified or not. Well, as you can see, guys, it shares access denied for user Ram, as because our default username was root, which I had given, so it will not be getting connected to our MySQL DB server. Now let me quickly write back root over here and move on by creating a database. So in order to do that, I'll quickly open file. I'll create a new Python file with the name as Python DB creation. Let me just name it Python DB1 creation. Now I'm going to write my first line of code, that is importing MySQL.connector, which is the package. Then I'm going to write MyDB is equals to MySQL.connector.connect, under which I'm going to pass in the three parameters that are host, which is equals to your local host. Then comes your username, that is equals to root, and then comes my password, that is equals to password 123. Finally, I'll move on and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do over here. So I'm going to create an object with the name as myCursor, under which I'm going to pass mydb.cursor, which is pointing towards the location. And finally, I'm merely going to print this object, that is myCursor.execute, under which I'm going to write create database, and let me say my database name is HarshDB. All right, and then I'll quickly move ahead and run this code. Let's see what is the output. All right, so it says that the database has been created, that is HarshDB has been created. Now I'm going to show you whether this database is existing in our MySQL workbench or not. So in order to do that, I'll just change few parameters and add a for loop. I'll explain you about the for loop part later. So let me just omit this part, HarshDB, and instead of create, I'll simply write show over here, and then over here I'm going to write show databases. Now I'm going to write for DB in myCursor. I'll simply print the database, Alright, move on and run Python DB1 creation file. Well guys, as you can see from the output, the reason why I used a for loop over there is because once my code enters the for loop, it is basically printing all the databases which are existing in our MySQL workbench along with the database HarshDB that we have just created, which is there in our output. So it's very clear. Now I'll quickly open my MySQL workbench and I'll write the same SQL query over there so that it's crystal clear to you. Alright, let me quickly maximize it. 1 second. Now, let me simply write show databases and click on execute. 1 minute, guys. Well, as you can see, our database HarshDB has been created along with all the other databases which are existing in our MySQL workbench. Now, let me just refresh the schemas. Alright. So let me just minimize this and I'll move ahead by creating a table under the database. So I think you guys are pretty clear with the concepts which I explained just now. I basically started off by creating or by establishing a connection between our Python and MySQL DB server. Further, I moved on and created a database, and now I'm moving on and creating a table under the database HarshDB. Now, how do I do that? Well, let me create a new file first. 1 second, I'll name it as create TB and Python. Alright guys, before moving ahead, I'm going to tell you one thing. The first 3 or 4 lines of code are going to be same everywhere. I don't find it useful by repeating the same first 3 lines of code everywhere again and again. I don't want to bore you guys with the same thing. So let me just copy paste it into the presentation mode. Yeah, Control V. Now I'm going to write my cursor dot execute. It's going to be create table. Suppose I give my table's name as employee, under which let me pass 2 parameters. They'll be name varchar 200, salary integer 20. We just close it, move on, execute this code. Well, I have done a very silly mistake, guys, and the error is also very self-explanatory. It says no database selected. I'm going to pass a parameter over here. It's going to be database is equals to HarshDB. And let me quickly move ahead and run this code. 1 second. Yeah. Alright, so when I run this code, our table has been created. Now I'm going to show you the table which I've just created in our database HarshDB. So I'm going to write the same code what I wrote while I was showing you the database. So let me just omit these things and add an S over here. And instead of create, let me just add a show. And let me type a for loop. So it will be for TB in my cursor print your table. Alright, now let me move ahead and run this code. So as you can see, we have created only one table under the database HarshDB. So it is showing that table, which is employee. Now I'll show you the table in our MySQL workbench. So 1 minute, guys. So instead of databases, let me just write tables. Let me just select the HarshDB thing over here. Instead of databases, let me just write tables, select HarshDB, and then execute this. Yeah, so once I execute this, well, as you can see, it is fetching the table and our table employee has been created on the extreme left hand side under the schemas column. Now I'll quickly minimize this and I'll move ahead by doing the read operation. So before I dive deep into the read operation, guys, let me give you a small introduction about this. So our read operation will basically happen in 2 stages. In my first stage, I'm going to populate my table with some values. And in my second stage, which will be the main stage where I'm going to do the read operation consisting of 2 fetch functions. So I'm going to talk about the fetch functions later. First, let me just, in order to populate my table, I'm going to make use of insert command from the SQL query. So let me just name it as insert op table and move ahead. Yeah, Control V. Before there's one more parameter which I left. It's going to be database is equals to HarshDB. Now moving on, let me create a new variable with the name as SQL form, and under SQL form I'm going to write the SQL query insert into employee. One second guys. Pass in the two parameters which I declared, which were name and salary, values, and make use of, or I'm going to write %s, comma, %s. Well guys, these %s are nothing but placeholders. You can replace them anytime you want with any other value. Now I'm going to create a tuple. Now the reason why I'm creating a tuple is because, again, in my second stage where I'm doing the read operations, I'm going to make use of two fetch functions. So there's one fetch function called fetchAll. So when I'm making use of fetchAll, I need not populate my table with a single value because that will not look good. That's the reason why I'm creating a tuple over here, so that to give you more clarity into what actually happens. Now let me just name it as Harshit. Let me give my salary as 20,000, comma, Amit, salary as 30,000, comma, Ankita, and her salary as 40,000, comma, space. Yep, I think I need to put this back. Yeah. Now when I move on, I'm going to simply write my cursor dot execute many, because if I use execute, it is just gonna execute a single value. But since I'm making use of a tuple over here, I need to write my cursor dot execute many and call in SQL form, comma, employees. And finally, I'm going to write my db dot commit, which is going to save my changes from my last executed SQL statement. Now let me quickly move ahead and run this code. So as you can see, our insert operation has taken place and our tuple has been inserted into the table employee under the database Harsh DB. Now I'll quickly exit the presentation mode and show you the same in our MySQL workbench. It's going to be the same thing. I'm going to write select star from employee and click on employee, click on execute. One second guys. Yeah, I'll click on the result grid over here. Well guys, as you can see, this select star from harshDB.employee, well, it changes nothing. Our concern is to basically view the tuple which we have created, and that tuple is being viewed in the result grid, that is under name and salary, the values which we pass, that are Harshit, Amit, Ankita, with the salary as 20, 30 and 40,000. Let me quickly minimize this, and moving ahead, I'll be creating a new file, and let me just name this file as readop table. All right. Now into the presentation mode once again, copy the first 3 lines of code over here. What I'm going to do is, yeah, let me pass the parameter database, which is equals to harshDB, and then I'm going to start off my read operation by the first function, that is fetch one. So let me write my code, and then side by side I'm going to explain you also why am I writing that part. So I'm going to simply write my cursor dot execute. Let's say I'm going to write a SQL query, that is select name column from employee. Okay, this is a very simple SQL query, and let me create a new variable and let me name it as my result. Under my result, I'm going to write my cursor dot fetch one. Now guys, this is one of the most important part of my code, because this is the first function of read operation. What fetch one is going to do is, it is going to fetch me one value from the column name under the employee table. All right, now when I move on, let me write the for loop, that is for row in my result, print the row, and when I run this code, as you can see, it has fetched the value Harshit from the row name under the table employee, which is again under the database harshDB. As you can see, this code is pretty self-explanatory. When I make use of the fetch one function, it basically fetches a single value from the column name under the table employee. Now, let me just quickly move on with my next function of fetch. In order to do that, let me just make few changes in this code. So instead of name, suppose I'm going to fetch the whole tuple. It's going to be select star from employee. And instead of fetch one, let me write here fetch all, and let me run the for loop. So it will be for row in my result, print row. All right. Now when I run this code, I'll explain you why am I doing it or what does fetch all do. Well, as you can see from the output, the whole tuple has been fetched. Now, when I make use of the fetch all function guides, it basically fetches the whole tuple for us, as because we are writing the SQL query select star from employee. So all the values which are there in the employee table, which was in the form of a tuple when we inserted it a while ago while we were writing the insert code, that whole tuple gets fetched. Now, I'll exit the presentation mode. I'll go to the MySQL workbench and rerun this code once again. Well, as you can see, there are no differences. The name is still there with the values Harshit, Amit, Ankita, and salary 20,000, 30,000, and 40,000. Suppose I write this thing, select name from employee. One second. I'm going to show you the changes of the fetch one functions. In order to do that, let me just write name again over here, name, and instead of fetch all, let me write fetch one. All right, let me quickly go ahead and run this code. So as you can see, it is fetching here. Now I'll go to the MySQL workbench and click on same thing. Well guys, these changes are not taking place over here because we were showing you the changes in the PyCharm, and since we applied a for loop over there, that's the reason why it is doing it. But since when we are using the backend database server, we need not do that because we are not using any loop or we are not doing anything. We are simply fetching the name whole column from the table employee. Now I'll move on and do the update operation. So in order to do that, let me just create a new file, a new Python file, and name this as update pop table. Yeah, let me close this. Let me just click on this, enter presentation mode. Yeah, control V. Let me pass the parameter which was database, that is equals to Harsh DB. Moving on, let me create a new variable with the name as SQL, under which I'm going to write update employee set one second salary. Let me set the salary to 70,000, making use of the where clause, where name is equals to, let's say I'm updating Ankita's salary to 70,000. And finally, I'm going to write my cursor dot one second execute, call in the SQL thing, and then write my db dot commit. Let me quickly go ahead and run this code. Our update operation has taken place, and in order to see the changes, let me quickly go back to the read operation. I'll show you the changes on both places, in the PyCharm and MySQL workbench too. So the last code which I wrote, let me remove this and right here select star from employee. This was fetch all. Okay, enter the presentation mode once again. Yeah, run this code. As you can see from the output, the changes have taken place and Ankita's salary is updated to 70,000, which was 40,000 before. I'll quickly move on and show the same changes in the MySQL workbench. So it's quite easy. Let me just rerun this code. This should be star over here. Yep, and then execute it. As you can see, Ankita's salary over here is again updated to 70,000. Now I'll move on and do the last operation, that is delete operation, which will also conclude my tutorial. It's going to be delete op, let me name it as table. Alright, enter the presentation mode once again. Copy the first 3 lines of code. I'll pass here the database parameter. Database is equals to Harsh DB. I'll move on and let me make use of the same variable which we used that time. Say suppose delete from employee where name is equals to, suppose I'm deleting my record guys, which is Harshit, and then my cursor dot execute all in SQL and then write my db dot commit, which is going to save the changes from my last executed SQL statement. Let me quickly go ahead and run this code. Well, the database spelling which I use is wrong, I guess. Well, as you can see from the error, it's quite justified. It says unsupported argument data BAC. So the database spelling is wrong. Let me quickly rectify that. 1 second, guys. Yeah, I'm gonna write A over here. I missed it. My bad. And run this code once again. So as you can see, our delete operation has taken place, and I'm going to show you the changes. Exit this. We'll go to read op. I'll enter the presentation mode once again. Run this code. Well, as you can see, the record Harshad has been deleted from here, and the same thing would be, or the same changes would have taken place in the MySQL workbench. Let me quickly open it and run this code once again. Well, as you can see, the record Harshad is deleted from here too. So this marks the end of Python database connection tutorial. I hope you guys learned something new today. Bye bye, take care, and happy learning.